And I'm going to turn myself off. Why don't we see anybody?
Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. My name is Richard Pazer, and I'm going to be your host today for today's virtual rubber seminar. I'd like to welcome all the members of the Rubber Chemistry and Technology Division, and also our affiliated rubber groups, like the Ontario Rubber Group and the Quebec Elaster Group. Thanks for joining us. Also, a very warm welcome for all other rubber enthusiasts across the world who are attending us outside of Canada. Again, thanks for joining us today. Today we have a pleasure of meeting someone from a rubber association. So this is going to be quite interesting. Our speaker today is Michael Lajonik, and I have a short bio of Michael. So since 2016, Michael has been managing and leading communications for the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada. He's a recognized communications professional with over a decade of successful experience in creating communication strategies and programs in corporate communications, public relations, media relations, marketing, and business. He has worked with several global brands in private, public, and nonprofit sectors across a broad range of industries, including manufacturing, resources, energy, technology, and many, many more. So he is the communication managers for TRAC, so the Tire Rubber Association of Canada. I'm really looking forward to his presentation today, just like I think all of you are who are in attendance. If you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of his presentation. So, without further ado, I would like to present Michael in his presentation, The History of the Tire and Rubber Association of Canada. So, Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Richard. And good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Richard, for inviting us to present. And if anybody has any questions, we are more than happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. As you can see from the slide number 1, we just celebrated our 100th anniversary. So I would like to take you through the history of our organization and what we are all about and what we've achieved over the past 100 years. So first, I would like to quickly introduce the association. The association represents the interests of the tire and other rubber manufacturers and importers of rubber goods to Canada, together with the rubber recyclers and suppliers. The association's focus is on strengthening and protecting the reputation and competitiveness of the Canadian tire and rubber industry. Our objectives are to develop and foster the interests of the rubber and tire manufacturers, importers, and distributors of rubber products, collect information and data about the Canadian tire and rubber industry, and share information with our members. This data is mainly focused on tire shipments from our membership, which represent about 85 to 90% of the Canadian market. The next objective is raising public awareness in members' products and services with focus on product sustainability, innovation, and safety. And when it comes to awareness, we also have a consumer education program that focuses on educating the public about proper tire maintenance, about winter tires, about low rolling resistance tires, all of which sort of tie in with sustainability and innovation. And also, last but not least, our objective to collaborate with public bodies, governmental agencies, and committees with respect to matters affecting the tire and rubber industry in Canada on our members' behalf. So when it comes to our membership, we have 16 tire companies who are our members. The biggest three in Canada are Michelin, Bridgestone, and Goodyear, who are the only ones who remain and still manufacture tires in Canada. And we'll discuss later about how this came about. Our other members are suppliers and recyclers. So the main three suppliers to the tire and rubber industry are Airbus, Cabot, and Hamilton Kent. But since the 90s, the sustainability and end-of-life tire management has become a focus of the industry and regulators. So we also have recyclers, our members. Our top three are CRN Rubber and Terra, Lytec, and Western Rubber Group, who all focus on tire recycling. So about TRAC's history. So we've been in business representing the industry since 1920. So the funding timeline of the association on January 6, 1920, 12 rubber manufacturers from Canada met with the Rubber Association of America, which is now US Tire Manufacturers Association. And the conclusion of this meeting was that the effort should be made to form an organization in Canada which could be affiliated with the Rubber Association of America. At this time, the Canadian organization was meant to be a section of the Rubber Association of America. Down the line, on February 4th, 1920, the companies who wanted to start a new organization met at the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company in Toronto. And in this meeting, Victor van der Linde, we have actually direct quote from this gentleman who owned van der Linde Rubber. He expressed the opinion that a distinctly Canadian organization was needed to deal with specific problems that faced Canadian manufacturers. Those issues were traffic and transportation situation, export challenges, industrial relations, and the commercial practices of Canadian manufacturers. So based on this, the member came together and decided to launch the organization, paying contribution of 3 cents per 100 pounds of purchased crude rubber. And this was remitted monthly. And C.H. Carlisle of Goodyear, Canada, was elected chairman pro tem, meaning temporarily. So on March 17th, 1920, the temporary executive committee received its lattice patent, which means the Rubber Association of Canada was officially incorporated. On April 12th, 1920, in Toronto, the Provisional Board of Directors met at the Goodyear's offices once more and formally elected its founding firm members. On the right here, you can see the first offices of the association in the Royal Bank building in Toronto. Here, just looking at the funding of the association, on the left, you can see the images of these people. It's actually a portrait from the 1925 annual meeting. And on top, you see the general manager of the Rubber Association of America, who was leading the meeting in New York. A.B. Haney, who eventually became I believe he became the first president, and C.H. Carlisle of Goodyear, who was the first chairman. On the right, you can see the founding member companies, and it's a bit of a, you're seeing companies from a bygone era, such as Ames, Holden, McCready, Kaufman Rubber, as well as last on this list, the Van der Linde Rubber, who was a gentleman who suggested that distinctly Canadian organization was needed. So 1930s, obviously the economic situation was that of the and by 1939, association's revenues dropped by 75% compared to the high watermark of 1927-28. And one of the economic outcomes were that the high labor costs and difficulty competing with low-cost imports from the US and Hong Kong, which is something basically Canada's been struggling apparently for 100 years. So the association's work at this time focused on the reduction of the excise tax on the crude rubber coming from overseas, and achieving this, this translated into savings of $175,000 annually for the members of the association, which in today's dollars is about $3.5 million. Another issue was maintaining tariffs on imported finished goods, and also working with the federal government on reporting and statistics. My right side is blocked by my picture. I'm not sure whether you guys can see the image, but it's the Goodyear blimp over the harbor in Toronto. You can see the old Toronto in the background there. '40s, obviously the wartime era, with Japan taking over the rubber producing countries. Rubber became one of the most critical materials in virtually every aspect of wartime manufacturing. And the government deemed rubber so important that the rubber industry was completely coordinated and controlled by the government. Rubber prices were frozen to avoid profiteering. And many senior executives from the rubber industry were also seconded to support the war effort. For example, the R.A. Martin, manager of the Dominion Rubber, was appointed as a deputy controller of the rubber control. And the association worked with rubber control to ensure each company received the proper allotment of rubber for production and produced the necessary goods for both war effort and domestic consumption. The government also created a crown agency named Fairmont Corporation that coordinated the rubber supply into common pool and acquisition of scrap rubber. And of course, just as discussed in the previous webinar back in the spring, Canada and the United States established Polymer Corporation in 1942. Polymer Corporation started to produce rubber in 1944, and the production produced 3,300 tons of oil-based synthetic rubber per month. And the demand for synthetic rubber was so great that companies still need to introduce the allocation program for the synthetic rubber as well in Canada. And this system remained in place until the 1950s. Obviously, women were a big part of the war effort, not just in manufacturing, but also in collecting scrap rubber and scrap products to support the production. So you can see one of the wartime flyers or posters that you see on the street on collecting bones, rags, rubber, glass, etc. So following the war effort, the association received a letter from, let me just read this out. So in the letter dated September 12, 1945, addressed to Paul C. Jones, the chairman of the association, Honorary C.D. Howe, Minister of Munitions and Supply, whom you can see on the image on the right side, expressed appreciation to the rubber industry for its contribution to the war effort. So I'll just read out this letter that's here in the cursive. Dear Mr. Jones, the last order of military tires is virtually complete, and so comes an end one of our outstanding contributions made by industry to Canada's war effort. All tire companies were involved, and together they can look back with pride upon the difficulties surmounted in the past 6 years. From the initial production of run-flat tires to the final development of synthetic, each problem as it arose was faced with a will and determination which from the outset ensured success. Production of military vehicles has never halted for lack of tires. Essential domestic requirements were also always met. Please convey to the staff and workers of all companies my deep appreciation of what has been accomplished. With kind personal regards, yours sincerely, C.D. Howe. (1950s). So obviously following the war effort, the business conditions globally improved significantly, and the suppressed demand for consumer goods basically caused a boom in the rubber industry. Korean War led to a North American defense production sharing agreement, which encouraged the resurgence of Canadian manufacturing. And the government saw this economic boom as a prime time to impose additional taxes on selected consumer goods, including vehicles and tires and tubes. So in this light, the association work focused on lobbying the government to lower the excise taxes. And below you can see a quote from the association's general manager in regard to 15% excise tax. It's, quote, "It is an economic absurdity that products which are used mainly in beneficial productive activities should be taxed at the same level as jukeboxes and the like." Another work the association focused on was securing more favorable freight rates from railroads and steamship lines, fighting dumping from low-cost producers, such as Czechoslovakia, Norway, and Germany, which is something the industry is facing to this day currently with production in Asia, and addressing the issue of excessive ocean freight rates of Canadian footwear sold in British West Indies. So what were the dark clouds? What happened is the government charged the association and some of its members with price fixing. Now, in 1930s and 1940s, there was a legitimate effort to impose controls on multiple products, including rubber goods. And during this time, rubber manufacturers were mandated to maintain consistent pricing in order to prevent wartime profiteering. So we don't really know why, but even following the war, the industry continued this practice even after the price controls were lifted by the government. And actually, the government only learned about this industry practice after they received identical prices on rubber products on a government tender. So this was a bit of a dark times for the association, and in 1953, the board agreed basically to plead guilty on the charges to minimize the cost and reputational damage to the industry and the association, and paid a fine of $20,000, as did several of its members. 1960s, the business conditions were such that Canada has started to become a global country that was trying to make its mark in the world, define its culture, and obviously technology was a big part of it. So notable Canadian technologies: the atomic clock, IMAX movie system, space shuttles, Canadarm. Those are all great inventions. The association work continued to focus on taxes and tariffs, and the Automotive Products Trade Agreement of 1965. This also known as the Canada-US Auto Pact. This led to the integration of the Canadian and US auto industries into a shared North American market, and the safeguards built into the Auto Pact supported the expansion of rubber manufacturing industry to meet the increased demand for tires, tubes, and automotive components. In the 60s, the tire standards also became a main topic, because prior to the 60s, there were no established standards for tires. So US created its minimum tire standards in the US in 1964, and our association took steps to introduce similar guidelines in Canada. Ontario Ministry of Transport adopted its standards in 1967. The Canadian Standards Association later adopted the US federal standards, which would be adopted by 4 provinces. And of course, the association also always worked with the Canadian Highway and Safety Council on promoting highway safety, producing and also produced videos and about safe summer and winter driving. On the right side, you can see an image from the 67 Expo, where the association supported the Canadian Boy Scouts Association. So in 1970s, the association celebrated 50th anniversary. The Canadian manufacturing continued to struggle to compete with the global markets, and the impact of the North American Auto Pact was very positive at this time. The impact of the pact was such that it continued to grow the Canadian automotive industry, and Canada's share of the North American auto production rose from 7.1% in 1965 to 11.2% in 1971, and moved from an automotive industry trade deficit to a modest surplus in 1970. And of course, still struggling and being challenged by the influx of tire products from abroad. This decade, it was mainly imports from the US and Japan. Also, Michelin opened its manufacturing facility in Waterville, Nova Scotia. And this actually caused a bit of a rift within the association and within the industry, because the conditions under which the production facility was created was very favorable towards Michelin, and the other tire manufacturers were looking for similar advantages. The associations, of course, with 50 years under its belt, continue to build its footprint nationally, but also internationally. The association has been working with the Canada Safety Council and the Canadian Council of Motor Transportation Administrators since the 70s, and we basically continue this relationship to this day. So we've been working together with these organizations for 50 years. Internationally, the association took up the work with the ISO. First meeting the association participating was 1971. Focused on the Tire Technical Committee 31, which focuses on tires, rims, and valves. And also, Canada is very strong when it comes to off-the-road tires. So the association took the leadership role when the ISO launched its subcommittee 6, which is focused on earth mover tire standards. And we still continue to represent Canada in those 2 committees. When it comes to tire standards, topic continued from the 60s and grew in the prominence. Main goal of the association was to create standard that would encompass the whole federation rather than just individual provinces. And even to this day, when there is a standards issue, we are talking about North America. We are not supporting standards that wouldn't work across the border. And obviously working closely with the CCMTA on working on standards, as well as Rubber Manufacturers Association, or USTMA in the US. The 80s were a hard decade. At least the opening of the decade was very hard for the association, because on December 31st, 1979, the Goodyear Canada and its, I guess, sister company Sieberling resigned as members. And obviously this was a big hit for the association, because Goodyear was one of the largest producers when it comes to dues, but without Goodyear, the statistical program for the association was also badly damaged. So to address this, the association hired Doran Moore, the gentleman on the top right, and his main mandate as the president was to bring Goodyear back into the association, but also pursue Michelin to join, who hasn't joined the association yet. So by 1983, Goodyear, Michelin, Bridgestone, Sumitomo Rubber, also known as under Falcon Tires, and Yokohama all joined the association, and Doran Moore's mandate was accomplished. We're 1980s. We're also talking about the free trade agreement, and Canadian creating the free trade agreement between the US and Canada showed several challenges. So one of them was that the Canadian rubber companies and tire manufacturers were basically smaller productions that were built with a certain purpose and only served a specific market segments. But Canadian government, Industry Canada, was interested in maintaining the percentage of Canadian content in the automotive production, and tires were a really good way of doing this. So looking at the last bullet, talking about the memorandum of agreement between the government and the members of the association to create and participate in a duty remission plan under Financial Administration Act. This leads us to gentleman on the bottom right, Brian James, who was a pivotal figure when it came to negotiating the new NAFTA agreement and its effect on the tire manufacturing in Canada. So Brian James, I met the gentleman. Unfortunately, he passed away. He was quite a maverick. He started with RAF during the Second World War, worked around the world in tire production. So he lobbied. He was the president of the association at the time. He lobbied and achieved a 10-year plan for duties phase out for the tire and rubber industry to help the industry to prepare for the free trade agreement. And thanks to his efforts and the association's effort, the three tire manufacturers who remain in Canada, Bridgestone, Goodyear, and Michelin, they are basically fully integrated into the global operation of these brands, and they are world-class facilities who are safely operating in Canada today. So come the 90s, 1990 in Canada has been dubbed the year of the tire fire, mainly due to the Hagersville fire in Ontario, but also Saint Amable, Quebec. So these fires became a pivotal moment and still remain a sort of a continuous reference for the industry and for the recyclers. And they're a reminder that shapes tire recycling and end-of-life tire management and tire sustainability efforts in Canada to this day. In 1994, our association created and hosted the first rubber recycling symposium, and this event has grown with us over those decades, and it's possibly one of the largest in North America and possibly globally at the moment. In 1990s were also the decade when winter tires became into focus, and Canada was the focal point of the global tire industry and policymakers regarding the link between tires and winter driving safety. So the association took the leadership and worked with the global stakeholders, the other associations, the tire manufacturers, on global standards and developing a test method that's in place to this day it's a voluntary performance-based standard for winter tires, and every winter tire that carries the 3 big mountain snowflake needs to pass this test. And since 1999, this test and symbol are used throughout the world to distinguish the tires designed for winter driving. Also on the right, you can see the original logo of the Rubber Recycling Symposium and a picture of David Suzuki with Brian James from the, I believe it's the first symposium of 1994. So 2000, over the past 3 decades, basically sustainability has become focus of not just the industry, but also the association and the regulators. So end-of-life tire management has become one of the main focus in Canada, but also for the association. The Ontario Tire Stewardship, which managed the tire recycling in Ontario between 2009 and 2018, has been established between, and the 3 founding members were Tire and Rubber Association of Canada, Retail Council of Canada, and the Ontario Tire Dealers Association. And the OTS was actually, it received its incorporation, the lettuce patent in 2003, and even the company was ready to launch due to some delays when it came to government and creating the regulation. It didn't start recycling tires until 2009. Our association is currently actively involved in managing 3 tire recycling programs in British Columbia, Manitoba, and Ontario. And Canada's ELT diversion rates today are virtually 100%. You can visit Canadian Association of Tire Recycling Agencies, CATRA, and you can see how tires are being recycled, what are they turned into, whether they're turned into new products, whether they're used as aggregate. You can find all this information with them. 2000s, the Tire Standards and Safety TRAC undertook a large ice traction study. It was one of the largest performance tests in the world at the time, and the results basically proved that the Transport Canada wanted to issue mandatory ice traction standards, but this test actually proved that it was really hard to test for ice traction because the results were way too variable, and creating a standard would deem itself very hard. Also in 2001, TRAC launched its Be Tire Smart campaign, and we continue this Be Tire Smart initiative, and this initiative continues to educate Canadian drivers about the advantages, the safety advantages of winter tires. We educate Canadians about proper tire maintenance so the tires last long. As you can see, PART, pressure, alignment, rotation, and tread. Those are the 4 things you need to look at to maintain your tires so they last as long as possible. And also raise awareness about low rolling resistance tires, which are more fuel efficient and save you money on gas, etc. And continuing to 2010s, environmental focus continues. Corporate sustainability has become more and more dominant when it comes to tire and rubber manufacturers, the R&D efforts. In 2016, Ontario introduced a Waste-Free Ontario Act, which changed the regulation on how the tires are being recycled. So we went from an organization that was a system that was managed by Ontario Tire Stewardship, which was basically an agency of the government, to something that's called the producer responsibility. So in this light, our association needed to support its members who are now responsible for managing recycling the tires they're supplying to the market. So we launched a new organization called TRACs, TRACs Tire Management Systems, who are managing most of the tire recycling in Ontario. Continuing on sustainability, major tire manufacturers continue to invest in end-of-life tire technologies, processors. Many of them are trying to incorporate recycled rubber in the new products. From the top of my head, I just saw a news update from Michelin that they're using, they're recycling plastic bottles to use them in new tire production. So all the tire manufacturers are looking for new solutions to be more sustainable. Also, emphasis on substituting petrochemicals with renewable materials, such as, for example, Goodyear is using soybean oil in their production. Companies are also investing in replacing natural rubber with new products, such as Russian dandelion or Waiuli. Bridgestone has a large testing production in the southern US, where they grow Waiuli and trying to figure out the best way of using Waiuli in new tire production. Continental's focus has been focused on the Russian dandelion production, and they do have a TRAC tire line that actually uses this source of rubber for production. And again, with sustainability being this important, our rubber recycling symposium just continues to grow, and it's just getting more traction every year. Obviously, we are not able to have our symposium in 2020, but we'll just we are hoping to have another one in 2022. And this is the picture of four of our past presidents, who basically managed the association since 1980. From the left, Don Campbell, he was the president between 1997 and 2001. Doran Moore, he was a gentleman who was mandated to bring Bridgestone and Michelin into our association. So he was the president from 1980 to 1985. Glenn Maidment, he was president between 2001 and 2020. He recently retired. And Brian James, president between 1985 and 1997. As I mentioned, he was a pivotal figure when it came to getting a good deal for the rubber industry in Canada when the NAFTA negotiations were underway in the 80s. So that's these are our association goals for nearby future. Basically, as we continue to mold a globally competitive industry for a better Canada. We focus on government relations, working with Transport Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Environment and Climate Change Canada. Our market data is a really important part of what we do, and we track basically monthly shipment of all of our members. As I mentioned, we represent about 85 to 90% of the market. Sustainability, it's here to stay. We love working on sustainability. End-of-life tire management in Canada is important. We recently launched a new committee to build new relationships in the end-of-life tire management. And we continue to work globally with our counterparts in the US, Europe, working with our members on a number of environmental issues that keep coming into play, such as tire roadwear particles, microplastics, harmful chemicals. And of course, our recycling symposium is still going strong. And we're also, as I mentioned, we are focused on consumer education, on educating Canadian consumers and drivers about the advantages of winter tires, proper tire maintenance, and fuel-saving tires. As I mentioned in previous slide, Glenn Maidment, he retired after, I believe he worked in the association since 1994 or maybe even earlier. And he retired as president in 2020. So we have a new president, Carol Hoshu, who is taking the association to the future. So that's all for me. Thank you all for your for participating in this webinar. we are happy to offer you, we have a free ebook for you in both English and French. So if you just send me an email, and we can just send you a PDF PDF copy of this book, and you can find much more information about what we just discussed here. And of course, as an association, we are always looking for ways to add value to our members, add value to the industry. So if there are any ways the association can help your companies, your industry, we're more than happy to hear you out and see whether there's something we can support you with. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Michael. Very enlightening, very interesting, well-detailed presentation. We got a good overall view of what is TRAC, starting from its objectives through its history and to what you're doing today. So I think a lot of us in attendance today really didn't know what TRAC was up to and what they've been doing, but you've done a really good job here of telling us in this presentation. So I'm going to go to the questions. Michael, we have one question here in the discussion coming from Dominique.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please describe the recent evolution of tariffs for the tire industry in Canada?
Oh, I think that might be a bit of a, I'm the communications manager, so I'm not the best person to address this. I'm not sure what the tariff environment looks like right now, but I'm more than happy to do a research on that, and definitely just drop me a line, and we can try and find answers.
Okay, all right, thanks. Are there any other questions from any other participants? You can just throw them into the discussion. I had one question. I think you responded to it, but you do have a relationship with other tire manufacturer associations in the world, and I assume with the United States, you're in step with what's happening also in the United States, because they are our biggest trading partner. So you probably have a very good relationship with
Yes.
that association.
Yes, we have a very close relationship with the U.S. Tire Manufacturers Association. We work together on a number of files. Right now, they're mainly focused on the environmental issues around the tire and road wear particles and chemicals. But of course, tire technology, data collection. We have a very good working relationship with them. We also have a good working relationship with the European counterpart, ETRMA. And obviously it's not disclosed, but yes, we do.
Okay. There, I see that, and I think you had told me that you're very good in the history of the rubber, and I thought that was very fascinating. Some of the information that you provided to us about, for example, that C.D. Howe letter, which was quite fascinating. A lot of people probably don't know today at the time that there were run flats because it was in his letter. So that's something actually I didn't know, but it came news to me that run flats, yes, were around back in the 40s and possibly earlier.
Well, I'm guessing it was a military requirement, right? I would say. But yes, definitely, just drop me a line, and I can send you the copy of the book, and you'll find some additional information to what we mentioned there. I think I skipped one of the slides to point out that the Polisar was on the $10 bill in the 70s and early 80s. That's one of my favorite sort of tidbits of history of the importance of synthetic rubber and rubber in general, globally.
And TRAC is a big player with respect to sustainability, as you mentioned. And you organized that rubber recycling symposium.
Yes.
A yearly event. Can you tell us a bit about that where is it located at? What are the topics? Who do you
Mhm.
attract to come to these symposiums?
The Rubber Recycling Symposium, it's biennial. It's every other year. So we are not sure about 2022, but our event should take place then. And we are focused. The programs usually focused on what the tire manufacturers are looking at when it comes to sustainability. As I mentioned, using Waiuli and Russian dandelion in production. What works? What are the stopping blocks when it comes to shifting to a renewable sources, etc. Then obviously we have the scientists who talk about sustainability, whether they're environmental scientists or engineers, and also the recyclers. What does the market for recycled rubber look like? We talk about things like that. Is rubber aggregate a way of going forward? Is it rubberized asphalt is the right way to recycle rubber? Basically it's a fairly large event. We always have a few hundred attendants. It's 2.5 days. Usually the event we try and keep it in Ontario, just because of our US members having an easier way to getting here. Niagara has been a good place for us, so it might be that our next one will be in Niagara, but I can't confirm that. And again, you can just go to our website, subscribe to our newsletters, and once we are ready to go out with our next iteration of the symposium, you'll get a notice.
Okay, yeah. Niagara is a great place for conferences. We've had some there as well. Great choice.
Yeah.
We do have another question that has come in. Is TRAC contributing to any research for new materials in the area?
Short answer, no. Long answer, I believe when it comes to rubber recycling, I believe the TRAC is working on some form of support for research, but I can't confirm that. But no, we are too small in some ways to basically support some large scale research when it comes to environmental issues and things like that.
Okay, great. Okay, I think there's no more questions, and I've gone through, I think, my questions. I've learned a lot here today. I took a lot of notes, and I didn't know what's interesting is there's a Canadian side to the tire and rubber industry, and you mentioned the winter tire testing, the ice traction testing, which is quite fascinating, and it's something that's very important to our country to meet the needs of the consumers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm quite proud of being part of this organization, knowing that this was an important undertaking in the 90s, basically developing a testing method and distinguishing tires for winter driving from other tires. Obviously, there's a significant difference when you are on winter tires versus when you are on your just general all-season tires on winter roads. And I believe there is a continuous effort on the ice traction, and our tire technical group could answer questions towards that if there are any. I believe there's a ice traction standard coming into play.
Okay, I know that I'm part of the American Chemical Society Rubber Division, and there's been presentations on ice traction and testing for ice traction.
Yeah.
And it's not easy.
Yeah.
And also the sort of materials that you require, the blends or whatever you need in the tread. So it's an area where I think more work needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I believe it's in the process right now. I'm not sure where that process stands as of today, but I believe there will be ice traction standard coming.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Today, I think that will conclude for today's talk. You have Michael's contact information. If you want to ask him any more questions, you can also download the booklet, The 100 Years. I have a copy as well. It's very fascinating, and it'll go into even more detail than what Michael presented to us today. So thanks again, Michael, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for having us.
And I just want to remind everybody for our next symposium, it's taking place on December the 9th, again, a Thursday at 2 p.m. We're going to have the pleasure of having Dr. Hans Graf. I think a lot of people in Canada know of Dr. Graf, as we like to call him. Very strong scientist, very interesting fellow. And he's going to be talking about artificial intelligence versus design of experiments in rubber compounding. So that's December the 9th. That's our last symposium or seminar of the year. So thanks for joining us, everybody, today. We were about 24 people today to listen to your talk, Michael. So again, thanks again. And everybody have a great afternoon. And we'll see you in a few months' time. Okay, bye-bye.